Let's get into the story time. So during this time, I was working in property in the institution. And when you work in property, you're basically responsible for inmates' property. And this can be property that they had when they first became incarcerated, and it can also be excessive property that they have that they're not allowed to have because it's considered contraband after a certain amount. Now, property also consists of things that can be purchased outside of the institution, such as like your Dirty Man magazines, your tablets, your specialty boxes that I told you all about a while back. So yeah, all of those items have to be accounted for. And when you work in property or really any other area of the institution, inmates also work in those areas as well. So yeah, all of those items have to be accounted for. And in addition to inmates working in the child hall, inmates actually work in almost every other area of the facility. With me working in property, I also have an inmate that's assigned to me, and they're working with me in property as well. So sometimes we help out the person that's over supplies. So when you're the one that works in property, you're responsible for things such as like chemicals, brooms, dustpans, toiletry items, any supplies that's used throughout the institution. Just like everything else throughout the institution, these items have to be accounted for. So let's just say that I decide to take off or go on vacation. Supply comes and help me out, and vice versa. And just like I have an inmate worker that helps me out in property, supply also has an inmate worker. And on supply day, when they pass out supplies, of course, they go around from dorm to dorm. Now, in addition, the supply officer is also responsible for ordering the supplies. And not only are these supplies delivered to the dorms, but they're delivered to every other area of the facility as well. And when I say other areas of the facility, I'm talking about like the child hall, medical, intake, R&E, admin. Those areas of the facility also receive supply. So the sergeant that was over supply was going to be burning some of their leave. So of course I had to step in and assist and make sure that supplies were ordered and passed out amongst all the dormitories and other areas of the facility. And as soon as I take over, I realize that the paperwork is out of order, the supply counts are out of order, the math just isn't mathing. But hey, I'm not responsible for that. I'm only responsible for the day that I took over. So I order the supplies come in, this goes on for a few weeks, everything is running smooth. No area of the facility is complaining. Everybody is receiving the amount of supplies that they're supposed to be receiving. Whereas before, they were like being shorted like 30 and 40 items. So the sergeant comes back, they take over their position, and then the cycle begins all over again with dorms being shorted 30 and 40 items. So now we need to find out where are these items going. Because everything had been running so smoothly for a few weeks and now they're being shorted items again, of course, word is getting out around the compound. Everybody's having complaints from every department within the facility. Now, because the sergeant was a part of the good old boy system, they were never questioned as to why, when they're working, there's always so many items that's shorted throughout the whole facility. So instead of them questioning the person who was in position, they decided to question me, the person whose items were not short when they were working in supply. Really? I was really offended because one, why are you questioning me? Shouldn't you be questioning your friend? But nevertheless, it is what it is, right? So they decide to question the inmate. So my inmate, just like I was only filling in, they were only filling in during supply as well. But the other inmate that actually worked supply, they were still there. So the inmate worker that was assigned to me was questioned as well as the inmate worker that was assigned to supply, right? And both of them said, we don't take anything extra. We only deliver what they tell us to deliver, and that's it. They were never left alone while working in supply. And not only are they being shaken down before they come to us, but they're being shaken down when they get to us, when they leave us, and when they get back into the dormitory. Not one officer had ever written them up or had ever confiscated any items from supply on them when they came back into the dormitory. Being that they were never able to tell where the supplies were going, they decided they was going to lock both of the inmates up. And I'm advocating for my inmate worker. I'm just like, absolutely not. I've never had an issue with this inmate stealing. But the sergeant over supply, they're not even trying to advocate for their inmate worker. Like, how long have this inmate been working for you? Have you ever had this issue before? They just allowed them to go ahead and take them to lockup and agreed with them. But child, y'all know it was some bullshit, right? Child, how has this inmate been working for you all this time? You never written them up, never had any infractions, never caught them stealing anything. But you don't even have the decency to advocate for them. And you know that when they go to lockup for this, for something that they said they didn't do, and we can't prove that they did, that they're going to be down there for a while. Fast forward, the sergeant over supply, of course, now has a new inmate worker that's working with them. And I now have a new inmate worker that's working with me. And the math is just still not mathing in supply. They're still coming up short, not 30 or 40. Now they're down to like 20, 30, but they're still coming up short. And in most facilities, people that work in admin positions and work in admin, we're usually gone between 4 o'clock and 5:15 at the very latest. Our cars are out of there. When I receive an inventory of tablets, sometimes I have to stay longer because each inmate's DC number is normally engraved into the tablet, and we have to do that one by one. Just so happened, the sergeant and supply, they're staying over as well. Not really paying attention to why they're staying over because that's not my business, but they just so happen to be staying over as well. So I go out to my car for a little break or whatever, and I notice that the sergeant is out there too, but they're putting boxes of items into their vehicle. I'm noticing, like on the side of the boxes or whatever, you know, it shows the description. Some is tissue, toothpaste, the little Brillo pad things, and some chemicals. Like I noticed those are the items on the box. But still, you know, sometimes people take boxes home from the prison when they're moving or whatever. So I really didn't think too much into it until one of the boxes fell. And the tissues were rolling all across the parking lot, all up under the cars and everything. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, let me go over here and help. So I was just like, as I'm helping, I'm just like, why are you taking boxes of supplies out of the facility? And they're just like, oh, I was taking them to another institution. And I'm just like, what institution? They claimed that another institution was short on supplies and they were going to allow them to borrow some of our supplies. We don't take care of other people's institutions before we take care of our own, especially when ours is short. On top of that, the other institution that they claimed they were taking it to were a little bit ways away. So I'm just like, you're going to take this in your vehicle rather than a state vehicle? So anyways, I called that institution when I got back inside, and per that institution, they did not need any supplies. They did not ask for any supplies and had never talked to the sergeant. So because you allowed both my and your inmate worker to go to lockup for some things that they didn't even steal, oh baby, I'm going to go ahead and write this incident report because the people needs to know. Now, normally I would mind my business, but because this sergeant had absolutely zero integrity, you didn't try to advocate for the inmates, nor did you try to advocate for me when they questioned me. And I'm not going to believe that other members of the good old boy system didn't know what you were doing because you walked right past them with the cart with these supplies and nobody ever questioned you, ever. So now it's time for the roundtable conversation. And this sergeant is just like, well, I took the supplies over to another institution that needed it. I was just like, yeah, but they said they didn't need it. Let's get the sergeant that's oversupplied at the other institution on the phone so we can verify that you took those supplies over to that institution. Now, when I asked for this roundtable meeting, I made sure that I got the right people in the room, right? And the other sergeant verified that they had never asked for these supplies. So now the sergeant has nothing to say. So now that we know that the sergeant was stealing the supplies and the sergeant know that they're about to be terminated, they start with the waterworks. State supplies are like the lowest of the low when it comes down to quality. I mean, you have to use like 24 plies of the tissue in order to get the job done. And you're one of the people that's telling inmates to work with what they got because they're not getting any more tissue until the next week because you're too busy stealing their tissue and supplies out of the institution. And this just shows the character of some of these officers. You were willing to let these two inmates go to lockup for something that they did not do. I mean, they're already in prison and here you are stealing the stink out of shit. So the officer, of course, was terminated and both of those inmates were able to get their jobs back in property and in supply.